Robert Rivas Radio, Tejano, and much more.
Robert Rivas Radio, Tejano, and much more. And at this time, I'd like to introduce and welcome Bob Gallarza to my morning show. Good morning, Bob.
Hey, well, thank you for having me, Robert. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on your show this morning.
Thank you, amigo. How you been doing, Bob?
I'm doing good. Doing real good.
I know we were talking earlier. Yeah. Always blessed to be alive. What about Bob?
Yeah, exactly.
And I know we were talking right now, and I was telling you, Bob, when we're doing this interview, man, if you hear me cough or whatever, I'm dealing with allergies, and you tell me you're dealing with them también, eh?
Yo también, and it's, being here aquí in Houston with the humidity and everything, it kind of, living out, well, I live in the woodlands, and, a bunch of woods y todo, and believe me, I don't know how Sam Houston and those guys, I think about it because I walk through some of these woods, and I don't know, man. I don't know how they survive just walking through these swamps.
Crazy.
It's amazing. Yeah, it plays. I had asthma when I was a little kid, and I've always had kind of respiratory problems, pero, you get through it,
Oye, Bob, ¿sabes lo que es, Bob? Estamos chiflados. Estamos bien chiflados nosotros. We don't have to live in the woods,
That's what I, yeah. They always want me to go hunting, and it says, hey, if I go hunting, there's got to be a Marriott, or at least a La Quinta, where I can stay.
Bob, you have done so much in the music business that I'm going to have to split this interview into two parts, for this morning show.
We can do it in three. We can do, si quieres, that's all right.
I want to give my listeners, before we move forward here, I want to give my listeners a little taste of what you've done in the music industry, and we're going to go back in the beginning of the music industry, not talking Tejano. Bob, you have worked with artists, R&B artists like Al Wilson, Ike and Tina Turner, The Fifth Dimension, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Gladys Knight. Amigo, that's impressive. That's an impressive resume.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. There's a lot of guys that I didn't really have the pleasure of working with. Most of them I have, but a lot of them we were on the same shows and became friends. I was considered a peer, even though inside of me I was just bubbling, because here I come from a little town, un barrio in Southern California, and all of a sudden I'm exposed to all these big artists that I used to see when I was a kid, and it's very humbling.
Let me ask you this, Bob. Did I miss any artists? Because I'm only going from what I'm finding here on the Internet. Did I miss any R&B artists that I failed to mention? Did I fail to mention any of them?
Yeah, well, probably so, but you know what? I can't really remember a lot of things. And, and it's really funny that most of the time I spent in mainstream music was with the Fifth Dimension, and then Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr., who were part of the Fifth, then they went on their own. They had a big hit. You don't have to be a star to be in my show.
Of course.
We were very good friends. We're still friends to this day. And Florence LaRue and Lamont McLemore and all these guys, we've remained friends for 40 years, and it's amazing, But there's a lot of people that I played with, and I forget, but from time to time, I will talk to some of the friends I had during that time, like some of the sound engineers who, there's a good buddy of mine. And, with Facebook, that's how I kind of rekindled a lot of the relationships with people I hadn't talked to in years. And they remind me of certain times that I forget, So, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of groups that I work with that I can't even remember. But I did have the pleasure of working with a lot of the big artists of that time. So, yeah, it was a great time.
Bob, I tell you what, before we move forward, let's go back here a little bit. Let's talk about your grandfather, how your grandfather introduced you to music. How did this happen, Bob?
Wow, was that where did you read that? Was that on a bio? Because I don't even recall that one.
Okay, so it is true. So we're good to go on it.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, the story. Here's the story, and I remember it so well. I was about 14 years old, and my grandfather at that time was staying with us at our home, my mom's dad. And he played, a little Spanish guitar. He played it, at church. He wasn't much of a player. I mean, of course, I didn't know anything about guitar. That was the last thing on my mind. And I remember that he had this guitar that, I'd see him there, and he'd pick away a little bit, not very good. But, I think about it, and I remember his guitar. I mean, if you ever saw Willie Nelson's guitar, how it's all taped up and has holes in it, well, my grandfather's guitar was even worse than that.
Really?
And he used to, decorate it, It's so funny. He had this, cheap jewelry, and he used to glue it on all over, thinking that was going to make it look nice and everything. But, it looked even worse. But anyway, the story is my aunt and uncle went to Tijuana, because we lived in, in San Fernando Valley, and Tijuana, the border is not that far. It's about 2.5 hours away, something like that. And they bought a guitar, an old Spanish guitar over there, a new Spanish guitar. And in those days, you could get them for about $20, I guess. And they gave him the new guitar. And, and so they told, well, what do you, so he said, well, I'm gonna give my old guitar to, somebody at church or there. And I don't know if it was my mom or one of them said, hey, you ought to give it to Bobby, and I could care less, but for some reason, they say, you ought to give it to Bobby, maybe he can mess with it, and that's how it happened. And so they gave me the guitar, and I had that guitar. I learned for about a year on that guitar before I ever got another guitar. I mean,
on your own, like I said. On your own, Bob. You learned on your own.
Yeah. And my dad, after about a year, I was getting pretty good on a beat up guitar, and it was amazing. And I asked my dad, hey, Dad, hey, you think, maybe I could get another guitar, and we were, my dad always worked. I mean, he was, but, we didn't have a lot of money, but he had told me, I'll never forget, he says, look, I don't know how many people out there remember a guitar player named Dwayne Eddy. He was very popular in the late 50s, 60s, and there was a song that was very popular in those days. A lot of people, I don't know, I'm giving my age away, but in the 50s and 60s, you had, very little radio stations, but the rock stations, there was a lot of hits that were instrumental hits, and,
okay.
There was a lot of instrumental groups, at that time. And, but anyway, there was a song that he had. It was instrumental, and he told me, and it was playing on the radio, and he says, if you can play that song that he's playing on there, I'll get you a guitar. And so I worked on it for I don't know how many months, and I can just visualize it. My dad was in the kitchen getting ready to have dinner, and I brought that old beat-up guitar to His dad, and I had bought the 45, and I played it. I put the 45 on, and I played the guitar solo that he was playing on the 45. And he just smiled, man. He couldn't believe it, And consequently, a few weeks later, we went and he got me my first electric guitar.
Let me ask you a question. You playing guitar and everything, just out of curiosity, have you ever played the Star Spangled Banner on guitar?
Como Jimi Hendrix? No.
Yeah. Well, not como Jimi Hendrix, like Bob Gallarza. Have you ever played it?
Well, I mean, no, I had never really thought about doing it. I remember Jimi Hendrix did it, and I think there, other people have done it. When somebody does something, even if I do it my style, hey, I don't know. I never Well, simple answer, no, I never done it.
But Bob, it is an idea, right? You say, hey, you know what? Maybe, why not? Just to have it on your repertoire.
Things I shoulda, I coulda, I woulda, in my life. Now,
Sure.
Unfortunately, I stopped playing actually about 3 years ago. I really don't even touch the guitar anymore, and I pretty much semi-retired now. But for a long time, for many years, people see me now more as a producer, artist, arranger. And I played a lot of guitar, a lot of lead guitar with a lot of big groups, and then coming over here to La Onda, people knew me, working with Little Joe, producing Little Joe, but also playing guitar. And I think I have a pretty credible name as a guitarist, but I think a lot of people know me now more so as I don't know how they really see me. I guess as someone who puts a certain signature sound to my music. No matter who I have coming in to sing, people can tell that that's a Bob Gallarza production, you know what I mean?
Let's talk about your relationship. How did your relationship start with you and the Fifth Dimension?
With the Fifth Dimension, okay. These are great, a lot of people, because like you say, I have a very extensive background in my career. Actually, I have two careers, one in mainstream and then one being here in Texas. And people have been, you got to write a book, Bob, because there's a few stories that from time to time I will tell about a lot of people, because I had the good fortune of meeting a lot of big actors and singers and, just people, very well-known people. And like I said, before, I grew up at a time where you didn't really see many Chicanos, out there working. I could, maybe there was one or two other guys that were Chicano and I didn't even know they were at the time I was working, because at that time, working in mainstream music, to be a musician, you were either bolillo or you were a negro. And you didn't see anybody. If you were Latin, you'd be playing in some tropical band or some band from Mexico or something like that.
Gotcha.
It was, you didn't see that. And so I think that's probably the biggest challenge for me breaking in. But then, having, the chance to audition and, to play with certain people, of course you have to have the chops. You have to have the ability, But getting back to the Fifth Dimension, I got a call from their musical director, and I was, my name, by that time I was doing some session work, and I was getting out there a little bit in Hollywood, and the Fifth Dimension's musical director called me, and they had asked, they had their guitar player, but their guitar player was from New York. And my understanding is that they were on a hiatus. They were on vacation for a couple of months. They took a couple of months off. But they were committed to do a concert at this celebrity tennis tournament in Mexico City. And instead of calling their guitar player out of New York to have him fly back, to Mexico to do it, they thought, why don't we just, hire a, guitar player here in L.A., because they're all from L.A. And so he called me, and he said, hey, look, I got your name from so-and-so, and, we got this gig, and, they would like to do it. And I said, sure, And so we took care of the information and, what it was going to, what I needed to do in the whole trip. And so I went and did it. And after the show, the group came up to me and asked me if I wanted to join the group. They fired their original guitar player, and that was the original.
Wow.
When they first started, they had the rhythm section, and they were the original rhythm section. They got rid of their guitar player to hire me. They loved the way I played. And
that's awesome,
really
dude.
Essence. Yeah, well, you know what? At that time, in that time period, most guitar players were, the ones that could read music were really from the jazz area, bebop area, more legit type players that really didn't have the feel for the R&B, the that kind of style, the blues, the rock, all that kind of stuff. Now, those kind of players that played R&B and all that kind of stuff weren't really readers. It's kind of funny, so I started coming up at a time where guys like me started to learn how to read. And I was playing already maybe 5-6 years before I taught myself how to read music. And the reason I did that is that I had always wanted to go and do session work. I always wanted to work with some of these big groups. I never really wanted to be a leader of a group. I just wanted to be in the background. I wanted to play all this stuff and travel and do all those things. And I knew I had to learn how to read, and able to get a gig like that. And that's what I did. It took me a couple of years to learn.
Now, Bob, with this is the relationship with the Fifth Dimension. What time frame was this? What year did this all happen?
It was around 1970.
Wow, that's the main. That's where the Fifth Dimension, man. They were right on it, man.
They were the #1 pop group in the world when I joined them.
So you started touring with them. You started touring with the Fifth Dimension.
I toured all over the world with them. Off and on, I was with that group for about 12 years.
That is, man, the beauty of that, Bob. Wow, that's impressive, amigo. That's very, very impressive.
And there's what I learned about the music business with the Fifth. I mean, you can't pay somebody. We being a top group like that, and arguably the #1 group in the world, they work with just the best of everything, whether it be musicians, producers, arrangers, booking agents, all that. So that's how I learned. I was there. I lived it. So I would watch, some of the arrangers and, a lot of the musicians. We would travel, but we would use like a 36-piece orchestra, with strings and the whole thing. So that's how I kind of got my ideas of learning how to arrange and write for other instruments. And, I would look at the charts. I would look at all the music that all the musicians, all the different instruments were playing, and watch the musical directors and the producers, and that's how I learned my craft.
That is just simply awesome. Now, I can only imagine all the memories you have, no doubt. But do you have a couple of special memories, Bob, that you can remember that, man, you're never going to forget, something that rose above all the other ones?
Well, like I say, there's a lot. There's a few that always stick out. But then, like I say, when I talk, occasionally I will talk to an old friend who was, there's a guy, a friend of mine, his name is JJ. He lives in Florida now, and he was the sound engineer for us during that period. And when I talk to him, he brings up things that I forget, and I say, oh, man, yeah, I remember that, But one that stands out is what people have to understand is when you were playing with a group like that, like the Fifth Dimension. Now, there were other groups that would do the same circuit, and there were venues all over the world that we would all do that were kind of the same. We would all do Vegas. Some of us worked at the same hotel. Some would work at different hotels. But the way it worked was that usually most groups like that would usually break in their shows in Vegas. Now, what we would do, and what most of them did when you're on that level, is that we would take a month off every year, and a new show would come in. They would get new writers, they would get new songs, material, lighting, everything to do a whole brand new show. And that show, they would tour and do that show, the same show, all year. And it's, that's how I learned mainstream methods of how they operate and what they do. See, because they're working all over the world, there's no reason to change your show.
Sure,
because you're
of course.
you have different people that come in all the time.
Sure,
To see a
of course.
Show. So
Sure.
it's not cost effective. I mean, it costs a lot of money to put a new show because you got scenery, you have costumes, you have lighting, you have choreographers, you know, all kinds of stuff, you know. So that's what we would do. And most of us would break in the new show in Vegas. Most of the time, I've worked just about every showroom in Las Vegas. At that time, we were working at the Riviera Hotel, which was probably the best hotel at that time. The reason why, it was still owned by the mob. And the mob took care of you. You know, they didn't care, you know, it's not like it is now. It's changed since it's become corporate and all that. It's not the same. The mob, you know, there's a lot of things to say, I guess, negatively about them. But you know what? When they were running it, they didn't get involved with the public. I mean, you didn't see, you know, shootings and stuff like that. All they cared about the money that they gambled, and they made that money. But if people that remember that time, it was very cheap to go to Las Vegas. The food was almost free, you know, all the time. Everything was, you know, very cheap because they didn't care about none of that stuff. Now,
Bob,
you know.
Bob, out of curiosity, did you know that they knocked down the Riviera?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Isn't that crazy? They knocked it down, man.
In fact, yeah, on Facebook, my buddy JJ, he's in Florida, and he's the one that showed a picture, and then we started reminiscing. Oh man, the Riviera, they tore it down, you know. But yeah, they sure did. But it's changed. It's changed, you know, from when I went, late '60s, early '70s. I mean, it was a whole different thing. But anyway, what I was saying about groups, you know, meeting new groups too, is we would come in, you know, a few days ahead to rehearse. And since, you know, when you're headlining, you don't have a day off. So consequently, that's how I met a lot of the other artists, a lot of the musicians, because they were still performing. So we would catch maybe 2 or 3 days of the artist that was getting ready to close. See what I'm saying? And so, you know, maybe we would come in and, the Carpenters maybe, or you know, there was many of them, Engelbert Humperdinck, Tom Jones, all these guys. And so we became friends. You know, we became friends with the musicians, with the artists, because they would come back and we'd be in the, of course, you know, we could go backstage with them and we'd hang out. And so I became friends with a lot of big name artists, you know, and then guys like Jay Leno. Okay, Jay Leno used to open for us. He was a comedian, and he would open. And Jay used to hang. Oh man, every time I was gonna go, like after the show, go to eat someplace, he wanted to hang with me. Hey, Bob. At that time, they called me Bobby G, because a lot of people had a problem pronouncing my name. Gallarza, you know, so they started calling me, hey, Bobby G, and then G, they would call me G, you know, so yeah, you'd be running out there, hey, Bobby G, you gonna go eat? I said, yeah, why? He said, well, can I come with you? Can you imagine, Jay Leno? Can I come with you?
Isn't that
now
something?
He probably doesn't even know me, huh?
I'll let you watch. He remembers you. I'll let you watch.
He probably would. Yeah, if we run into each other, I'm sure.
That is unreal, man.
We spent a lot of time. Together.
That is awesome.
Oh, yeah, there was a lot of stories like that, Jay. You know, we used to hang out. Because he worked with us. And then when I was with Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis, they had a summer show on TV, and Jay was on the show. He played like a road manager for the group, you know, on the TV show. It was a summer show. A lot of those groups at that time, you know, Sonny and Cher show and some others, brothers and all that, they all had those shows. And that's how we became very good friends. And then he started touring with us, opening for the show. And, oh, man, we toured all over the country with Jay. And, just a lot of big groups. That's how I got to meet a lot of guys. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Marilyn McCoo and Billy Davis Jr., are they as friendly as they appear to seem to be?
Yeah, they are, you know, but what people, I guess, need to realize, and I did was that the way you have to understand that for me, yeah, I was a fan of all these people, but yet once I started working with all these people, I was considered a peer. I was no longer really a fan per se, and they didn't treat me like a fan. Now, when you're in the public eye, you have to, you have an image. Everybody has an image. That doesn't mean that they weren't down to earth. That means that they weren't, nice people, because they are.
Sure.
But
sure.
There's a certain aura that people expect you to be like you are on stage. You know what I mean?
Of course.
But yeah, they were great people, and they're friends today. I mean, I'm talking 40 years, and we still talk to each other, and all of them were like that. They were probably, the Fifth Dimension were probably the most grounded people of that time. Now, I could tell you some stories about some people you would think were wonderful, but to know them in person,
sure.
is a whole nother enchilada,
I think that's in anywhere, no, Bob. That's in anywhere, any genre.
Well, we could go, I could tell you some more of those stories. But, they were great people.
Bob,
and they're all still living except for Ron Townsend, the heavyset guy. And he died, I would say about maybe 7 years ago, something like that. A real nice guy. They were all good friends to me. Marilyn and Billy were probably my closest friends. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. You were with them for about 12 years, you said, ¿verdad?
Yeah, off and on. Because
okay.
What had happened is I joined them, stayed with them for a number of years, and then when Marilyn and Billy decided to leave, they were really the main singers, of the group.
Sure.
And so they left, and they hit it. They had a big hit. And around that time, I was getting a little. I'd been with them for a while, and it wasn't the same. And so I told. I never forget. We were closing a tour. I guess it was their last week when they announced that they were going to leave. And I took them aside and I said, hey, look, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be, with the guys here, but, if you have need, of someone to play, I'd love to do it. And they were on. I mean, they loved, the idea of me telling them that. And sure enough, about 6 months later, they called me and, asked me if I wanted to join them. And they didn't even have a rhythm section. They just had a musical director who was the musical director for the Fifth. So his name was John Miles. He's no longer here, but and he's the guy who called me for the gig in Mexico City. How ironic. So it was me and John. We joined Billy and Marilyn, and I stayed with them until they decided to break up, and they became Christians, and they started doing more of the Christian scene and all that kind of stuff. So, and then it's strange. About a few months after that, Ron Townsend, the heavyset guy from the Fifth Dimension, called me out of the blue. What are you doing, Baba G? And I said, no, I'm just here, man. And he says, look, we're getting ready to open up in Vegas, and we want to call all the original guys, as many guys as we can find, to come back and do it with us, because they hadn't played Vegas in a while. And so that's how it rekindled me going back with the Fifth, and then I stayed with the Fifth a number of years after that. It was great.
That is just simply awesome, dude. I tell you what, let's take a break in the action. We're listening to Bob Gallarza on Robert Rivas Radio.
Robert Rivas Radio, Tejano, and much more.
Robert Rivas Radio, Tejano, and much more. And I'm back here with Bob Gallarza. Bob, you're bringing back a lot of memories of all these artists that you're mentioning. Vegas, Riviera, the Fifth Dimension. I mean, dude, all this is going on, Bob. All of this is going on. Where did you say, you know what, it's time for me to go to Texas?
Well, that's funny, after working with all these groups, and it's funny because they kind of intertwine. It all started with Little Joe. Now, back in, I want to say around 69, right before I joined the Fifth, I had a buddy, a neighbor, he had a band, and he was into, well, at that time they didn't call it Tejano, they called it Tex-Mex or Chicano music, Música Chicana, whatever, there was no term called Tejano at that time anyway. And he came by, and he had, he knew that I was doing arranging. At that time I was, kind of really getting into arranging. Once I had learned how to read, it didn't stop there. I really wanted to express myself, because I always had a feel for arranging. I just didn't know how to put it on paper. And so once I taught myself how to read, then I taught myself how to write for other instruments, and so on and so on. I never went to school for music. A lot of people find that hard to believe, but I'm not proud of it, but I just learned, and it's amazing because most of a lot of the musicians that I bring in the studio or bring in, a lot of them have PhDs in music. They're music teachers or professors, all this kind of stuff. And here I'm writing the stuff, and they're looking at it, and they say, "How did you ever think of that?" I would have never thought of that.
That's impressive. That's very impressive.
I didn't go to school. Yeah, and they would be amazed at, a lot of stuff that I write, and but anyway, I would say around 69, no, 70. It had to be 70 because I was already with the Fifth Dimension. This guy that I started writing, that's how I got introduced to the music in Texas. He brought a bunch of albums, and he asked me if I could write the horn parts that were on these songs. And I looked at all the albums. They had a big stack of albums, and it was all like Little Joe and the Latineers and Sonny Ozuna and, these guys. And I recall who Sonny was because of Talk to Me,
Okay.
And,
sure.
But I had no idea Sonny did Onda. I didn't, I just heard that song he had, Talk to Me, and I didn't think, that this guy, that's the same Sonny? Yeah, he does this stuff. I said, wow. And then I saw the Little Joe. I said, Little Joe? I didn't know Little Joe could sing, and I said, yeah, and I says, well, I thought he meant Little Joe from the Cartwrights, Bonanza. I mean, it's funny now, but what do I know about Little? But anyway, so I listened to the stuff, and now you have to understand, I'm listening to it with the ears of somebody who now had the good fortune of working with some of the biggest and greatest bands in the world.
Sure.
Session players, all that stuff. So I'm listening to the stuff, and the quality was very poor, I felt, But what they did music-wise was fascinating to me. The polka, I listened to, these polkas that they were doing and the way they were playing them, and I just found it so fascinating. Like, wow, I didn't even know you could do that to a polka, And so I found it very intriguing to me, And so that's how I got acquainted with the style. So, okay, then about a year later, I guess, Little Joe was in town. And this Robert, my friend, who had brought me those albums, says, hey, Little Joe is in town, man. You want to go check him out? And, yeah, I was home. We were home for a couple of weeks from traveling. And he took me to go see Little Joe. And the band who was opening up for Joe was some guys I had written some arrangements for. And they had asked me if I wanted to come in and sit in, with it. Excuse me. So I did. So this was before Joe went on. so I went and I played. I didn't even think nothing of it. I was playing. And then I got off stage, and then Joe and Johnny and all them came up and played, and wow, they sounded great, you know. And then they came down, and I was standing there by the stage, and Johnny and Joe were together, and they come up to me. And Johnny was the first guy that I had met. You know, at that time, I don't know, man. Joe was kind of like, he was very quiet. You know, he always had his arms crossed, and he wouldn't say nothing. And kind of standoffish. But Johnny was very, very friendly. Johnny comes, hey, dude. And, yeah, man, how are you, man? Yeah, great band. And he says, yeah, man, we heard you playing, man. And, hey, we're looking for a guitar player, man. Would you be interested? You know, and I said, well, you know what? I said, no, this is serious, man. And I said, well, thank you, but I'm already playing with a group. He said, yeah, we heard them. Yeah, we heard them. Yeah, they're okay, you know, but you want to play with Little Joe? And I said, well, no, that's not the band. I was just sitting in. Those are just some friends of mine. I play with another group. Well, and he said, well, who's that? And I said, well, the Fifth Dimension. And then they looked at each other like, you have to understand, Robert. I mean, that was the time when everybody knew who the Fifth Dimension was. I mean, they were like the top band in the world.
Sure, man, sure.
Yeah, you know, so they look at each other and then they kind of laugh a little bit and say, oh, okay, man. You know, like they didn't believe it. Yeah, okay, I to watch you, bro. And so that was it. And then that was my first meeting, you know, meeting them, okay? And then that was the same time that Joe had decided to move to California for a while. He moved his band, and he hired some guys over there, and his family, everything. They moved to Canoga Park, I believe. And because they were traveling so much in California and working so much over there, they were so, you know, popular, which a market that I never even knew about. You know, I never went to those kind of dances. You know, I wasn't from that scene. I didn't know anything about it.
Of course.
And yeah, so anyway, they set up an office there. And again, I was with that buddy of mine, and again, I was off. I wasn't off, but we were working in town. I believe it was the Universal Amphitheater. We were going to play there for about a week. And so we were coming down, and he says, hey, this is where Little Joe's office is. Man, let's go by and see if somebody's there. I said, yeah, okay. So we go down there, and we knock on the door, and all you could see was smoke coming out of the doorway, you know, like Cheech and Chong movie, you know.
Steve, is that coming on?
And, yeah, you know, so they open the door, and there's Joe. I'll never forget, Joe's there with a desk, with his feet up on the desk, smoking a joint. And there's Johnny también, and I guess a couple of other guys. They were there. I mean, I guess that's all they did, because I didn't see nothing in there but a desk. I didn't see no papers. I didn't see no record player. I didn't see nothing. But anyway, so like we walked in, and I guess Robert had become somewhat friends with him, and so they knew Robert when he walked in, and he said, "Yeah, you remember Bob? This is Bob." And they looked at me, yeah, Fifth Dimension. They go like that, and they kind of laugh, you know. Yeah, Fifth Dimension. Hey, what's up? So I kind of, you know, I knew they didn't believe me, but I told them, I said, well, look, it just so happens we're playing in town, man. If you guys want to come by, I'll leave some tickets at will call. And they kind of looked at each other and said, oh, really, you know. And so sure enough, I went and did the show there at the Universal Amphitheater. Great show. We had about, it was packed, you know. And again, we had a big orchestra, almost a symphony, you know, playing with us. And I'll never forget, after the show, you know, I got off, went backstage, and I forgot my sunglasses that I had left on top of my amplifier. So I walked back on stage, and pretty much all the people had left. And I look out there, and I look down the aisle, the middle aisle, and I see these two little guys walking together up to the stage. And I look down there, and it's Joe and Johnny. And they walk up to the stage. Hey, man, how'd you enjoy the show? I told them. And they just say, we're not worthy. We're not worthy. and from that day on, we became the best of friends. And that's how it started. That was the beginning of. Now you got to remember, this was around 1970, 71, and I didn't get together with Joe until 84. So, but we remained friends, but I never thought I would be playing the music. And it just, that was another situation where finally in 84 I decided to retire. I was burned out. I had gone all over the world. I'd done everything I wanted to do. And I had met someone in Houston on a cruise. So before I left, I guess it was the 5th, I started flying into Houston a lot. And that's how I rekindled the relationship with Joe, Little Joe. He had a club in Pasadena, out there by Mickey Gilley's. And I became friends with a limo driver that used to pick me up from the airport in Houston, and he took me to the show, not realizing that I knew Joe, Little Joe. And so we went over there, and I, hey, Joe, he looked at me, hey, man, what are you doing? And that started everything. That was the period where Johnny was getting ready to leave Little Joe.
Right.
After all 25 years of working together,
right,
Johnny decided to leave and start his own career, separate career. So it's funny how my career has kind of gone from one thing to another, and it's all led by, I think, destiny, in a way, karma. I don't know what you call it, but things always happened for a certain reason. It was time for me to retire from there. It was time for me to rekindle a friendship, relationship with Little Joe at a time where he needed me to help him. And that's how it all started. In 84, when Johnny left, Joe was in the middle of doing an album, asked me if I could go in and help him mix one of the songs. And the rest of the story is, from there on, he just kind of got me more and more into wanting to, do stuff. And consequently, that's now, long story short, I'm here.
Wouldn't you say, Bob, that timing is everything?
Everything, yeah. Timing is everything. Has a lot to do with your choices. And, a lot of times that's what I'll tell, people wanting to get into the business, ask me what they should do, how they should do it. I always say, you need to prioritize, first of all. You need to practice your craft every day. Work as hard as you can on it, and take advantage of everything. I believe everyone will get at least one opportunity in life. It's what you do with the opportunity. And if you're prepared, you can take advantage of that opportunity. If you're not prepared, it may be the only opportunity you ever get to be somewhat successful in a business that's very hard. It's very hard to be successful in music business. Actually, all types of artistic careers, it's very hard to be an artist, a painter, an actor. Many of us never get the chance to really, work at our craft professionally.
I tell you what, Bob, let's move forward here now. Let's talk about your project, On the Edge.
On the Edge?
On the Edge.
CD?
Yes, sir.
Well, that was, consequently I started producing Joe. And we formed, kind of a partnership, the whole thing. And worked with Joe from 84 to '89, where pretty much extensively I was there in Temple, where he lived, where he had his office. And, it consequently started, and I had I really didn't want to play guitar anymore. But he's the one, he always loved the way I play guitar from the first day we met, and asking me to join his band, so this was his opportunity to get me to go to play, not just to produce, but to go out and travel. So that's what I did, and I liked it because it was different. The music was totally different than what I had ever done before. The people actually were different. I was playing for my raza now. There was a culture. There was a cultural significance to what I was doing now. And being with the number one guy, again, the icon. And isn't it ironic that being in mainstream music, I worked with a number one group when I got with them, and then I come to Texas to produce the number one guy in La Onda Chicana.
Did you only come out with one CD with Sony on the Edge? That was it?
Yeah. Well, what happened was, when in '89 I had to leave Joe. My dad was dying, and I had to go back to California. So what had happened was I got somebody to replace myself, and again, that was a change in what my destiny, I guess you might say. And because I don't know how long I would have traveled with Joe, really, but that changed it. And once that changed, even though Joe had asked me, hey, come back anytime you want, I just felt that something told me that the timing that, I need to move on to something else. And that's when everybody approached me to start producing them. And that's when I started producing a bunch of other artists, as well as Joe. I was still producing Joe. But because I had brought in Sony Records and signed Little Joe, consequently, that's how everybody in Texas got signed, through us. And then I became friends with Jose Behar, who became president of Capitol, EMI. So there were the two major labels that were in Texas, and I was kind of the significant force in bringing them in. Consequently, I was able to do my own recordings, which was unheard of. They had never heard of someone, well, Bob, you don't have a band. I said, yeah, I know I don't have a band. Well, you don't even sing. Yeah, I know I don't sing. So how are you going to do a CD, in a Onda where everybody is either a singer or they got a band or something, And I said, well, look, it worked for Quincy Jones. In L.A., that was the only analogy that I could come up with. Consequently, that's why the name took on, not because I named myself that, because people in the radio business start calling me the Quincy Jones of La Onda, because what I did was start bringing CDs, start doing albums, and bringing guys that I had produced, like Joe and Ruben and Ram, Jay, all these people, just about everybody at that time, and started having them guest on my CD. On the Edge was the first CD I did, and it was for Sony Records. And consequently, I called my production company On the Edge Productions. And that's how it all started to this day. That's what I'm known for. And the reason for that was I never set out to be a recording artist per se. I just wanted to have the chance to do some music that I wanted to do in the style that I wanted to do it. And I wanted to take some of these artists who have become my friends, to come and sing stuff that I wanted them to sing, not stuff that they picked necessarily for their albums. You see what I'm saying? And that's how it started, and then the touring, with a band was the second thing that nobody had ever done. And so I thought, well, since I've created, by that time, quite a few hits with a lot of these stars, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to go out and perform some of these songs and bring in some of these artists, 3, 4 of the artists, and do shows. And that's how I started becoming this artist, Bob Gallarza, you know, and that's really how it began, and to this day, that's how kind of people see me now more as an artist, I guess, producer, you know, for a certain signature sound that I've come across, you know, in my musical styles, you might say. And I think that comes from the West Coast musical career I had, the upbringing in music, and then coming over here and learning what this music was all about. I have to thank Little Joe for really showing me, because I had no idea, Robert, how to play this music. I had no understanding of what it was. And so just, you know, trying to figure it out. And to this day, I still don't call myself authentic. You know, I emulate it. You know, I mean, I created a sound for myself that works for me, you know. And people have taken it and embraced it. So, I mean, for that, I'm very thankful.
Bob, I have a person named Rolando. I hope I say this right. Doria, D-O-R-I-A. Now, he's got a question for you, okay? He told me to ask you, on your album, On Common Ground, what was your inspiration for that album?
My inspiration for the album, why I called it Common Ground, or?
Yes, where did the idea come from for On Common Ground?
Well, it's really a combination of what I had done previously with all my albums. It's not really any different than the other compilations that I would bring in guest artists. That one, I think, is one of my better albums. It's kind of hard to say. It's like having children. Which one is your favorite, right? But on Common Ground, I'm always trying to look for a good title, a significance in the title. On Common Ground, I always like that because it's kind of, it puts us in the same, we're all of one people, you know, la raza. Well, I consider, you know, ourselves, you know, raza, our culture. It's always going back to culture because I feel that this is one of the few musical art forms that is based on a culture, our culture. And I think it's one of the true original art forms in America. I firmly believe that. And being objective about it, because I didn't grow up playing it. Like most guys here grew up playing the music, so they don't really see it in the same light as I do. Because to them it was handed down, family to family to family, and they've always brought up in it. They've changed it somewhat here and there, but for me, I was totally alienated to this music. But what it did, it instilled the pride I had con la chicanada.
Con la chicanada. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. La chicanada. I've never heard of that word. Never heard of that one. La chicanada.
I made it up.
La chicanada.
It's a good word, though, isn't it?
I like that word, dude. La chicanada. Órale.
Right. Con la chicanada. I like it better than chicanísimo.
I've never heard of that word. La chicanada.
But anyway, yeah, you know, anyway, that's kind of common ground. You know, we're all on common ground. We're all on the same tierra, you know.
Bob.
And that's why I named it that. But as far as the material, it's just material that I seem to come up with and ideas, and then I try to find the right person, the right singer for that particular song. And that's how I pick the artist to come on. And I really had nobody turn me down to come in and sing on a certain song because they know that it's going to be done well. And it's usually something that they're not familiar with doing. If you on that particular CD, there's a song I had Ram do, and he listened to it, and he said, man, that's a great song. I don't think I can do it, Bob. I said, yeah, you can do it. And he did a heck of a job, you know. And, you know, there's another song on there that became actually probably the biggest hit out of that song, Amorcito Corazón, that a kid by the name of Gabriel Olvera, he had never recorded before. I did a Christian album for him. He's, he does ministry and all that kind of stuff. And that song became a big hit, Amorcito Corazón, all over. And it was his first recording. And so that's kind of, and you know what? When I do songs, I like to do things with a challenge, trying to prove things that people, for some reason, people have always kind of, I don't know, we have a quality instilled in us that it's hard for a lot of us to give kudos. You know what I mean?
Sure, of course.
There's always something, like they're always trying to pull you down some way. The crab theory, you heard that, right?
Yeah.
But with me, it's like, okay, so I give Little Joe a hit. Oh, well, yeah, you gave him a hit because that's a Little Joe. So I don't get no credit for it, right? Or I do something and I happen to have horns on it, and it's a hit. Well, because he's a horn guy. That's all he can do. And then so purposely I went and did a song I had Ram do, which was one of my biggest hits. I Got a Never Ending Love. I brought him on my Forever album, and that was probably the biggest hit I ever had. and they had no horns.
And that was a remake, too. That was a remake. También.
That was a song that I took from a band called Delaney and Bonnie. And Delaney Bramlett was a guy who I had met and worked with back in L.A. And so, it's funny. And strangely enough, Delaney, when I used to go to his house in North Hollywood, he had a home there. 2 houses down, you've probably heard of Edward James Olmos, right?
Of course.
He lived 2 houses down. I was there with Delaney, and we were working on some stuff. Eddie comes by, and Delaney introduced me to Eddie. Now, at that time, Eddie went by the name of Eddie James. There was no Olmos. And I looked at him, and I didn't know if he was Arab. I didn't know if he was Indian. But I never thought he was Chicano because he didn't
Arab
like that. He was no activist like he is.
Arab or Indian.
Yeah, and he had hair. He had hair that went down to the floor.
Really?
Yeah. And he, when I got to know him, because he had called me. I was with the Fifth, but I had just joined the Fifth, by the way, and he called me and wanted to know, he was looking for a guitar player to do some stuff. And so I went to go see him on the Sunset Strip there. One of those, if people remember the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, it's when all those clubs were rock groups. And he was there. He had a real nice group. He couldn't sing worth a damn, I didn't think. But he had an aura about him, man. He used to dance, and he'd untwine like a snake, kind of acting, And he had his hair up, with a comb, and then he would pull the comb out, and the hair would drop all the way to the floor. What the hell? And,
I can't picture that, man. I cannot picture that.
No, this was before he acted. He wasn't an actor. He was just, he had a little band, and so consequently, he actually at that time he was married to, I don't know, a lot of people might remember a Broadway musical actor named Howard Keel. He used to, he was a big actor. He used to come out like in Showboat and a lot of these movies of those days in the 40s and 50s. Big actor, and he was a racist. he couldn't stand Eddie, because he married his daughter, And he used to tell me stories. Oh man, this guy hates me, man. But anyway, then he started acting, and the first I had seen, he was doing a Broadway show before it became a movie, Zoot Suit. I don't know if you remember that, Robert.
Of course.
Okay, well, Luis Valdez and Danny Valdez Danny became, they became very good friends of mine. Danny Valdez became a very good friend. Luis also did La Bamba with Richie Valens.
Right.
Now, again, here we go. How ironic and everything. Richie Valens grew up in my neighborhood in Pacoima. That's where I grew up. Richie was about 7 years older than me, so I never met him because he had died. A lot of people don't realize the guy died. He was only about 18, I think, when he died. Yeah. And I was still a little kid. But I went to the same junior high. In fact, when the plane crashed at the junior high, if people remember, that was his nightmare that he always had, of the plane crashing into junior high. That actually happened. I was home that day when that plane crashed, but we saw it. I was with my mom. We lived about 2 blocks from that school, and we saw it crash with another plane. And again, how ironic. And so when they made the movie La Bamba, Danny had no idea that I was from that town, because man, he says, man, if I had known that, we would have got you as a technical advisor. Because I started telling him, hey, look, I saw the movie, dude. That ain't right. That is not correct. This is not correct. I was there, And if you see Richie Valens, that's exactly the way I was brought up. Walking the neighborhood, carrying a guitar. That's what I did. That's how I learned. I would learn from different guys that played a little bit of guitar. I would learn what they did. And once I learned everything he did, I'd move on to the next guy who was a little bit better until I became the best. And that's how it happened.
I tell you what, Bob, we're running out of time. So that being said, any last words for your fans?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for the last 30-some years aquí in Texas. All my fans, all the people that love my music, that have come to the shows and have just followed me throughout. I can't say how much I appreciate it, and to be thought of con mi raza, is very humbling. And I've met very distinguished people in my life, big name people, but nothing greater than to be honored by my own people. I can't say enough about that. And I'm in Texas. I will die in Texas, and this is my home now. And again, just for all the entertainers out there, all aspiring entertainers, again, just be true to your craft, work hard, and take advantage of that opportunity that I'm sure you will get someday. And that's about it, Robert.
Bob Gallarza, thank you for being part of Robert Rivas Radio Morning Show.
Well, thanks for having me, Robert.